Hello Ellis, and welcome to Gallery Heinzel. We're chuffed to have you with us and delighted that you could provide and create so many paintings for this show. 30 paintings is a big body of work.
I've been working on and off towards this show since before winter time. There's a mix because there's such a big mix of sizes. So there's like really big ones and then smaller ones. And yeah, I'd say maybe they've been coming towards completion over the course of 6 months.
Did you find that the seasons affected your work? Did your palette change as the winter wore on?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I was spending last year, I spent actually 5 months last year travelling around in my van and not painting at all. I took a massive break from painting and was travelling around, ended up all the way down in Wales and different places, and I saw so much in that trip. Like I was travelling around all the islands in Scotland and all the way up in the northwest, and I think a lot of that scenery and how I was feeling really embedded themselves in my mind, but I still didn't feel like I wanted to paint then. So when I came back from that trip in October and then started painting away September, October time, it was like an emptying out from within all of those scenes that I'd saw on the road. And I'm not sure if it was the colour that changed so much. It was more of just the feeling changed in them. They're a lot more lighter and brighter. They're not so dark, this body of work.
Over the winter, I assume you were working in a studio.
Yeah, so I had a studio. So I've got a studio at the moment, which is brilliant because then it means I can have, and it's a big studio, so I've got lots of space to create some really big works. And yeah, it was really good to go back to that space, and then almost having had the summer to like soak up lots of new ideas, get lots of new source material inspiration, and then the winter for me was stopping, slowing down, resting, and then going into hibernation mode and painting.
Where did you start with the painting? Do you have an idea in mind?
Yeah, that's quite hard to answer that actually, because I never know what's going to come out when I start a painting. I never have a specific idea of how it's going to look. It tends to be a really big canvas in front of me because I do prefer working really big. I think that's just because it lends itself well to my style. But I tend to either add a bit of texture onto the canvas first, or what I'll do is I'll block in a rough composition with an oil bar just so I can have a rough idea of where I want the sky or the sea or the landscape. But because some of them are quite abstract, there tends not to be a specific line where the sea and the sky meet. Yeah, I never actually really have a plan, and that tends to work.
Do you prime your canvases at all?
Yeah, they're all primed before, and then I'll tend to have maybe like 5 or 6 on the wall at the one time, and then I'll start to work in layers, because sometimes, especially in the winter, they could take up to a couple of weeks to dry, or within each layer. So there tends to be maybe 5 or 6 I'm working on at the same time.
What do you prime them with?
Just like a white primer. Yeah. I tend to always have them white to begin with, which I know a lot of other artists have different colours that they'll put down as a ground first. But I'm not intimidated by the white. I don't mind. I think because I just go right in and start marking big blocks with an oil bar, and then I just see what happens. Yeah, I never have a plan. But what I'll do is, because my work's all quite abstract and it's never from a specific place, like my work is all about my remembered feelings and memories of being immersed in an environment and my interpretation of a moving sky or a challenging sea or crashing against the rocks, then it's always like glimpses in my mind of remembered feelings of being in a place that I then want to put across on the canvas. But what I will do is when I'm out and about in certain places, I will take photos now and then just so I can remember certain aspects of the light. Or what I'll also do is I'll have little sketchbooks with me, and then I'll jot down little bits of movement and layers within the sketchbook when I'm in a place, because then sometimes if I'm in the studio and I feel a bit just a bit stagnant, I'm like, I need a bit of inspiration, or I'm not sure where I'm going with this piece, and I can look back at my sketchbooks that have got lots of big water droplets on them, and there's a lot of movement in them anyway, and I'll remember that feeling, and that tiny little sketchbook will provide inspiration for a really big canvas.
Are there any particular paintings that stand out for you?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one that is called All Is Calm, which is it's actually probably one of my favourites from this body of work, and it's a 1.2 metre long one, so it's quite big and it's quite dominant, and I just love the feeling of it. It just feels very peaceful, because a lot of the other work's a bit more turbulent, and there's a lot more there's a lot more movement in them, whereas with this one it seems a lot more quieter and a lot more at peace, and there's a lot more light within it, and so I'm really happy with that. But I'm happy with all of them for different reasons. And then within this show as well, there's 4 1.5 metre ones, which I'm really happy with too, because I think I've let go a lot more within them. There's a lot more energy and movement within all of these. There's a lot more layers and a lot more experimenting with different mediums. Like I was using a lot more oil bars to create texture. I was using some texture gel. I was using the oil bars combining with the oil paint and working on maybe 4 layers. So I feel like there's a lot more playfulness in these ones, which I've not used so much before. They're definitely a lot more light, which is good.
This is a question I ask every artist. How do you know when you're finished?
Oh, I don't know, it's just a feeling. Yeah, it's really hard to answer that. I feel like a lot of artists, that must be really difficult to answer as well, because it is just a feeling. And that's why I always find it I'm always a bit hesitant about putting them out there on social media quickly, because I might go back into my studio the next day and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like that anymore. It might change. So I'm always quite hesitant about finishing a piece and putting it out on social media quickly, because I think unless you're completely happy with it in yourself, then some people could be like, oh, that's definitely finished, or other people might not like it, but it has to be feeling content within yourself and feeling that it's ready.
Well, they're here now, and we're absolutely itching to get them up and on the walls. Ellis, thank you so much for the insight you've given us into your work and the background to this collection. And thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful photographs from your journey last year. They've been fantastic. Thank you.